Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tale, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now let's get into today's tale. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, it's never enough? Like every bit of effort you put in is invisible, taken for granted, unseen. That was my life. I remember clearly that quiet Sunday afternoon in my little rented apartment on the east side of Atlanta. The air was calm, warm, tea gently soothing my fingers, my phone vibrating nonstop on the coffee table. It was Mom again. Noah, my older brother. The same three names flashed across the screen relentlessly, an unspoken demand hanging heavy in every unanswered call. For the first time, I let them ring, untouched and unanswered, watching each vibration fade into silence, feeling freer with every breath. My name's Maya. I'm 32 years old, a financial analyst. Someone most people would call successful. But at home, at least in the home I left behind, I was invisible. The quiet fixer behind every financial disaster. The safety net beneath every reckless fall. The steady voice drowning beneath louder demands. For over 10 years, I carried burdens that weren't mine: bills, debts, endless second chances handed out like candy. My parents leaned on me, Noah depended on me, but somehow, I was never the one they chose to celebrate. I wasn't the daughter they bragged about at dinner parties or the sibling who was praised for potential. Instead, I was simply there, quietly providing, silently sacrificing. But on that afternoon, something shifted. As I leaned back into the worn sofa, eyes closed. Against the endless calls, I finally saw clearly. The only person who could rescue me was me. This isn't just my story. It could be yours. Is a story about finding strength in silence, freedom in saying no, and discovering that sometimes to truly save yourself, you have to stop saving everyone else. Stick with me for the next 30 minutes, and I promise you'll see a reflection of your own struggles, your own quiet strength, because at some point, everyone faces a choice between loyalty and freedom, obligation and peace. This is how I found mine. Have you ever felt invisible, even among the people who claim to love you most? Have you ever poured every ounce of your energy into supporting someone else's life, only to realize that the more you give, the less they notice? My name's Maya. I'm 32, living in Atlanta, working as a financial analyst. From the outside, my life probably looks pretty good. Steady job, quiet apartment, the peaceful independence many dream of. But for years, beneath that calm surface, my life was a quiet storm of silent sacrifices. I grew up believing that family always comes first, a beautiful lesson, until I realized it came with a price. Since my teenage years, I was the responsible one. The daughter who quietly cleaned up messes and solved problems nobody else seemed to notice. When my older brother Noah dropped out of art school and struggled from one job to another, Mom and Dad called it finding himself. When I earned a full scholarship to Georgia State University, their response was a casual, "Couldn't you find a school closer? Noah might need the car." It's strange how quickly your hard work becomes invisible when people get used to your sacrifices. I started working at 16, not for clothes or movies, but to buy a secondhand laptop just to keep up in school. No one asked if I needed help, or if I had eaten dinner, or if the late-night shifts were exhausting me. But when Noah needed a brand new MacBook after quitting another job suddenly, money wasn't an issue. Mom said confidently, "He needs this to restart his life." It wasn't just about the money. It was about being seen, being appreciated. Even just once, I learned slowly and painfully that no matter how hard you try, you cannot make people value you if they choose not to see your worth. This isn't just my story. It might be yours too. The invisible child, the quiet hero behind the scenes, desperately hoping someone will notice your sacrifice. But here's something I learned the hard way. Real appreciation never comes from endless giving without boundaries. Sometimes to be truly seen, you must first step away from the shadows. And that's exactly what I did. But before I tell you about the night everything changed, let's step deeper into the story, to the place where my invisible world finally shattered, forcing me to choose myself for once. Have you ever noticed how easily kindness can turn into expectation? Like when a one-time favor becomes a lifetime obligation, silently and without warning. For years, my family saw me not as a daughter or sister, but as something else entirely, the family bank. At first, it seemed harmless, just occasional small favors, I remember. Clearly, the night it started, I was still at the office finishing paperwork when my phone buzzed. It was Mom, her text short and urgent. "Maya, your dad forgot to pay the electricity bill again. Could you send $200? We'll pay you back next week." I didn't think twice. Of course, family helps family, but next week came and went and I never saw that $200 again. Instead, requests kept coming, Dad's medication got expensive, the fridge broke down, Noah needs money for a new online course. Each request felt reasonable, even necessary, and saying no seemed selfish. Before I knew it, I'd become a silent ATM dispensing cash at every problem. One evening, exhausted after a long week at work, I came home to my small, barely furnished apartment. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the blinking numbers in my banking app, heart sinking as I saw my savings dwindling again. My paycheck wasn't mine. It belonged to everyone else first. I thought about the vacation I'd planned, but had to cancel because Noah needed funds for an art class he never attended. I remembered the dinners I skipped to make sure Mom and Dad had groceries. You know, there's a quiet but crucial lesson hidden here. Generosity without boundaries becomes a trap. It's so easy to believe that giving endlessly means you're loving deeply. But the truth is, real love never drains you. Dry, real love respects your limits. And here's something else I learned. When you don't set boundaries, people start believing you have none. Each time I silently agreed to their requests, I unintentionally told them it was okay to expect more. But every endless giving has a breaking point, and mine was coming sooner than I knew. That breaking point wasn't dramatic. At first, it was quiet, gentle, yet powerful enough to change everything I believed about family responsibility and myself. Let me take you there. Next to the moment I discovered the truth hiding beneath years of silent sacrifice. They say home is where the heart is. But what if the heart you're protecting is built on lies? It happened one evening just as I was preparing to sign the paperwork for a small condo I'd been saving toward for years. A dream of mine, something simple, mine alone. That's when the call came. My dad's voice was low, slower than usual. "Maya, the bank's breathing down our necks. If we can't come up with the money, we might lose the house." The house, the one I grew up in. The one where Noah once turned the living room into an inspiration studio. The one where Mom always made his favorite soup. The one I hadn't felt welcome in for years. But still, it was home. "How much?" I asked, already knowing the answer would hurt. "Just about $9 to $80. A month, just for a few months until we get back on our feet," he said, almost rehearsed. And so I did what I always did. I canceled my condo deposit and sent the first payment that night, and then another and another. Months passed, then a year, then two. Over $20,000 in total, not counting the birthday gifts, the roof repairs, or the extra $200 Noah needed for a creative app he never used. But here's the part that shook me. Months after I finally stopped sending money, I checked the mortgage account. It was overdue. 8 months overdue, froze. I stared at the screen like it couldn't be real. But it was. The payments I'd sent diligently, faithfully stopped being used for the mortgage, long before I ever stopped sending them. They had lied to me. Not once. Not in a moment of desperation. But consistently. Quietly, willfully. They took my help and used it for something else. Something they never explained. And the worst part? They never even said thank you. It wasn't just a financial betrayal. It was the moment I realized my loyalty had been exploited. That I wasn't protecting a home, I was enabling a system built on entitlement, not love. You see, trust isn't broken by one big act. It's worn down over time by silence, by evasion, by selfishness, masked as need. And when that trust finally cracks, the truth comes pouring out like water through a broken roof. But that truth didn't break me. It woke me up. Because sometimes you need to see the cracks in the foundation to understand. It was never your job to hold the roof up alone, and confrontation that followed. It wasn't quiet, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and it was coming. Every story has a turning point. That moment when something inside you quietly snaps, not with anger, but with clarity. Mine came on a rainy Sunday. Afternoon, I had just finished a long shift. Exhausted, damp from the drizzle, still in my work shoes, instead of heading home to rest, I stopped at the store like I'd done so many times before. I filled 2 grocery bags with salmon, fresh vegetables, and frozen meals, and my parents' favorites. 40 minutes later, I was standing in their kitchen, placing the bags gently on the counter. No one greeted me. Instead, Mom walked in, arms crossed, and said without a trace of warmth, "Maya, we need to talk. What you're sending every month, it's no longer enough." Blink, not enough. My heart skipped. Then Dad stepped in from the living room, his voice calm, but cold. "You live alone. You make good money. Meanwhile, we're struggling. Don't you think that's unfair?" Noah, of course, was stretched out, on the couch with a controller in hand. He didn't look up when he said, "It's not like you're lacking anything. What's wrong with sharing a little?" I turned to him, the brother who hadn't held a steady job in years, who still had Mom making his meals. I looked him straight in the eye and said, quiet, firm, but shaking inside, "Sharing goes both ways, Noah. All you ever do is take." Mom's lips pressed into that tight, familiar line, the one she used when she felt challenged. She stepped forward and said, "If it's that much of a burden, then maybe you should walk out that door and don't bother coming back." Time froze. It wasn't the words that broke me, it was how easily they came, as if all I had done, all I had sacrificed, meant nothing. I stood there, soaked from the rain, my heart pounding my arms, still holding the second grocery bag. I didn't argue, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I placed the bag gently on the table, looked at them one last time, and said, "If that's how you feel, then I hear you loud and clear." And I left. No one followed. No one called after me. Just Noah, muttering something about how dramatic I was as the door closed behind me. I walked out of that house with nothing but my car keys and dignity. And the rain soaked through my clothes, as if to wash away every bit of guilt I'd been carrying for years. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't their daughter. I was their safety net, and they only noticed me when it was gone. Here's the thing. Families may not always say thank you, but they should never make you feel like you're only valuable when you're useful. Love without respect isn't love. It's leverage. I didn't drive straight home that night. I pulled into a quiet gas station and with shaking hands opened my contacts. One by one. Mom, Dad, Noah. I pressed block. My hands trembled. But my heart, it felt light. Of course, I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know how loud the silence would get. But I did know this. I had taken the first step away from a life that was slowly breaking me. And what came after was a kind of freedom I didn't know existed. Freedom doesn't always come with a grand celebration. Sometimes it arrives in the quietest ways. Like the first morning you wake up and realize no one needs anything from you. After I walked away from my parents' house that rainy afternoon, I didn't go back to beg, to explain, or to feel guilty. I went home. My home. It wasn't much. A third-floor walk-up in Midtown Atlanta with creaky wooden floors and chipped white paint on the walls. The kind of place most people would call a starter apartment. But to me, it was paradise. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to a flood of texts. No 6 a.m. calls asking me to schedule doctor appointments. No guilt trips at midnight asking for another 150. Just this once. Instead, I made coffee. I opened the window. I let the sunlight pour in across the small kitchen table where I finally had time to sit. Just me, my thoughts, and the morning light. On weekends, I wandered through Piedmont Park. I took long walks with no destination, no deadlines, no grocery lists scribbled in my head. I read books I hadn't touched in years. I took a beginner's painting class, not because I was good at it, but because I wanted to try something that had nothing to do with anyone else. And maybe the most surprising part, my bank account finally started to breathe again. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't in survival mode either. Every week the number crept up. Slowly, quietly, steadily. It wasn't just money. It was evidence that I could build something for myself when no one else was reaching into my pockets. But freedom comes with echoes. Late at night, in the quiet, I would sometimes wonder, did I go too far? Did I walk away too fast? And that's when I'd remind myself of a simple truth. Choosing yourself after years of being drained isn't cruel. It's healing. You see, for so long, I had confused obligation with love. I thought being a good daughter meant constantly showing up, constantly giving, constantly sacrificing. But that kind of love isn't sustainable. It's not even love. It's fear. Fear of being labeled ungrateful. Fear of being the bad one. Fear of letting go. But once I let go, I started to feel lighter. Not because I hated them, but because I was finally loving myself. And yet, as I sipped my coffee one golden morning and listened to the city wake up beyond my balcony, I had no idea what storm was brewing behind the silence. Because silence, I learned, doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the space, before the next attempt to pull you back in. Let me show you what happened next, when freedom was tested by the very people I thought I'd finally escaped. Before we continue, I'd love to pause here for a moment. I know many of you might be feeling deeply connected to Maya's journey right now, perhaps seeing reflections of your own lives, your own struggles. If you've ever been in her shoes, or if this story has touched your heart so far, please take a second to share your feelings down in the comments. How does Maya's experience resonate with you? Have you ever faced similar emotional burdens within your own family? Your voice matters. Let's support each other by sharing our stories and reminding each other that we're not alone. Silence is a strange thing when you first find it after years of noise and chaos. It feels like a gift, a breath of fresh air, a space to heal. But for those who've always depended on your voice, your money, your presence, your silence becomes terrifying, because it means they've lost control. 3 months had passed since I blocked my family. I hadn't answered a single call. I hadn't sent a single dollar. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't the one keeping the roof over their heads, or the fridge full, or the car running. And then the messages started. First, it was subtle. Maya, your dad got a letter from the bank. Please call me. We're worried. I didn't reply, because I already knew. Worried didn't mean about health, it meant money. Then came the calls. Every single day. Mom's voice on voicemail started calm. We just want to talk, sweetie. Let's work this out. Then pleading, are you really going to abandon your parents after all we've done for you? And sharp, accusatory. You're letting this family fall apart just to prove a point. Noah's voice chimed in, bitter and cold. What do you think you're doing, Jess? Feeling proud of yourself? If mom and dad lose the house, that's on you. I stood frozen in my apartment the first time I heard that voicemail. Holding my phone, staring at the wall, heart pounding, not because I felt guilty, but because I knew. That was exactly what they wanted me to feel. Guilt, shame, pressure. You see, manipulation doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes disguised as love, wrapped in we're family or you've changed. But here's what I learned. In those moments of doubt, you haven't changed. You've just stopped playing the role they wrote for you. And when you stop playing the role, the fixer, the rescuer, the always available daughter, they panic. Not because they miss you, but because they miss what you gave them. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared about myself more. Still, the pressure kept building. One night, I got a message from Dad. Why haven't you paid the mortgage this month? The bank is pressing us. I stared at those words, mouth slightly open, stunned. Why haven't I paid? That's when the chills set in. A cold, creeping feeling in my stomach told me something was very wrong. And this time, I wasn't going to guess. I wasn't going to assume. I was going to find out. Because when you stop being the silent helper, people show you who they really are. And what I uncovered next changed everything. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea growing cold in my hands. Dad's message echoed in my mind. Why haven't you paid the mortgage this month? I hadn't paid because I stopped helping 6 months ago, completely. No transfers, no groceries, no emergency money. So why did he still expect it? That question wouldn't let me sleep. So I opened my laptop and logged into the old mortgage account, the one under Dad's name. I never checked it before. I had trusted them, trusted that every dollar I sent went where they said it would. What I saw made my heart drop. The last mortgage payment made from that account was 8 months ago, which meant 3 months of my money had come in after they'd stopped paying. 3 months where I thought I was saving their home, and they were spending it somewhere else. I cross-checked it with my own bank account. Almost $3,000 sent after the last payment. No explanation, no warning, no apology. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I wasn't just hurt. I was betrayed. Not in a moment of desperation, but in a pattern of manipulation. And here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the people you'd never expect to hurt you. I have carried this family for nearly a decade. While Noah sat around calling it his process, while you two made me feel guilty for setting goals, and the moment I stopped, I become the selfish one. They both fell silent. Then Noah's voice appeared from the background, full of disdain. You've changed. You used to be kind. I laughed gently, not bitter. No, Noah, I used to be afraid to say no. And that's when Dad tried one more time. We'll pay you back, we promise. Just help us one last time. We're losing everything. I tightened my grip on the phone, heart pounding but my voice steady. Then lose it, because that's not my responsibility anymore. You see, there's a powerful difference between building boundaries and building walls. Walls shut people out. Boundaries protect what's inside. I wasn't shutting them out because I stopped loving them. I was protecting the pieces of myself I had given away for far too long. And here's what I've come to understand. When people only value you for what you give them, they never truly valued you. Setting a boundary isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's saying, I love you, but not at the cost of myself. And as I hung up that phone, not with anger but peace, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control, not over them, over myself. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something precious. Space to rebuild, to reflect, and most importantly, to begin again. Let me share with you what came next, and what I learned in the quiet that followed. Because healing doesn't happen in the noise. It happens when we finally listen to ourselves. Choosing yourself sounds empowering, and it is, but what no one really tells you is that it comes with a cost. After that final call, I powered off my phone and left it on the table for 3 full days. No text, no voicemails, no sudden emergencies for me to solve. Just quiet. And at first, that quiet felt like peace. I made my coffee in the morning without rushing. I opened the windows, letting sunlight pour into a space that finally felt like it belonged to me. My apartment still had creaky floors and mismatched furniture, but it was mine. Every inch of it, every breath of it was earned with my own strength. But then night came, and with it came doubt. I'd stare at the ceiling and ask myself the questions I didn't want to hear out loud. Did I go too far? Did I abandon them? What if they actually lose the house? What if I really was the one holding it all together? Because here's the hidden truth. When you've been the fixer for so long, silence doesn't always feel like freedom. Sometimes it feels like guilt. I went back and listened to the old voicemails. Mom's voice trembling. You'll regret this. That house means everything. To me, Dad. Weary. We're out of options if you don't help. And Noah, sharp and bitter. You're letting this family sink because of your pride. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't feel like a villain. I just felt tired. Because for years, they tied me down. Not with chains, but with guilt, with phrases like, "You're the pride of this family, and we'd be lost without you." At the time, I believed those were compliments, but I see now they were just ways to keep me in place, keep me useful, I thought. Back to the countless late nights crunching numbers for clients. While Noah mocked me for not living in the moment, the one vacation I had saved for all year canceled. Because my parents needed the money urgently. And that time I told Mom I was exhausted. Only for her to respond with disappointment, not concern. You see, being the good one doesn't mean you get love. It just means you get used. And sometimes, when you finally stop giving, the silence that follows isn't punishment. It's the sound of freedom. Here's the lesson I want to leave with you. Choosing yourself may feel lonely at first. You may lose people. You may face judgment. But what you gain, peace, clarity, and self-respect, is worth far more than the approval of those who only loved what you gave them. But even after everything, one question still echoed in my heart. One that no amount of silence could fully answer. Did I do the right thing? And that's where I'll leave it with you for now. Because in the final moments of this story, I'd like to share what healing truly looks like. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet beginnings. Peace doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up quietly, like a soft breeze through an open window, or the sound of your own breath finally steady again. In the weeks that followed, I didn't rebuild my life overnight. There was no big revelation, no Hollywood moment, just small, steady steps. Started keeping track of my goals. Goals that had nothing to do with anyone else. I opened a new savings account labeled for me. I started taking long walks again. Not because I was escaping, but because I wanted to enjoy the world without rushing. I went back to therapy. Something I had put off for years because someone always needed something more urgent, and little by little, I began to feel whole. I remember one afternoon sitting in a small cafe near Piedmont Park. The sun poured in through the windows, and I caught my own reflection in the glass. Calm, rested content. For the first time, I didn't see the tired daughter or the overworked sister. I saw a woman who had reclaimed her life. And that's what healing really is. Not some big finish. Line you cross, but a quiet return to yourself. So often we believe that walking away from toxic patterns means we've failed. But maybe walking away is the first step toward building something better, healthier, stronger. Here's what I've learned, you don't owe anyone access to the parts of you they've constantly drained. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And you are allowed to say no. Not because you're cruel, but because you've learned how much your yes is worth. Setting. Boundaries didn't make me cold, made me free today. My parents' house might still be at risk. Noah may still think I'm selfish. The phone might stay silent, but my heart isn't. It's learning how to beat for me again. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been the one who always showed up, always gave, always put yourself last, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to choose yourself, and you are not alone. And maybe, just maybe, that's where a new kind of love begins. One that isn't rooted in guilt or expectation, but in mutual respect and peace. Now, before we go, I have a small favor to ask. Let's take one more moment together. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, for listening and hopefully seeing parts of yourself in Maya's journey. The most powerful lesson we can learn from her story is that setting healthy boundaries isn't an act of selfishness. It's an act of self-respect and self-preservation. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give others is teaching them how to stand on their own feet. Now, I truly love to hear from you. How did Maya's story resonate with you personally? Has it changed the way you view your own relationships and boundaries? Please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories like this. Remember, your story matters too. See you next time. See you next